Welcome back to the Sales Cadence Podcast. This is the podcast for everyone in sales, because everyone is in sales. We're all selling something. My name is Matt Sykes. I'm your host. I'm the author of the book Sales Glue and Converted. And if, like me, you're as passionate about helping people make truly epic buying decisions so that more people buy what you sell, great news. You're in the right place. Hey, welcome to the Sales Cadence Podcast. If you're new to the show, I hope you enjoy what you hear next. This is episode 71, so hey, if you like what you hear on this one, then there's a few you might want to go back and listen to. In general terms, if you're new to the show, then we are effectively a podcast dedicated to the world of selling. So on occasions, we will drift into the world of business and, I don't know, maybe a bit of psychology, touching on the old entrepreneurship kind of stuff. But in essence, the torch, if you like, the guiding light, the North Star, which plots our course, is the world of selling. And so you're most welcome, and thank you for joining me. And if you're a regular listener, I'm just grateful you're keeping the faith, and welcome back. End of quarter one, so I'm recording this first week in April 2025, and crikey, where has the year gone? We're already 3 months of the way through the year. I mean, there's some benefits with that. The clocks just went forward. I'm looking out of my office window and the sun is shining. I'm back on the golf course with a vengeance. Actually, my golf's pretty good. I've worked really hard over the last 12 months to go through that period that we collude in the illusion as golfers of being in this sort of transitional phase where things are really crap. But actually, we're working on stuff to try and improve. And I've come out the back end of that now, and I'm playing pretty good. And so the great thing about this time of the year is now the sun's shining, the grass is growing, and the greens are improving, and you're putting all that hard work into practice on the course, and things are going quite well. So I'm really liking the fact that we're in April. I'm really looking forward as well to the middle of the year. I have a really good friend, Alan Henry, who's a scratch golfer, and he and I last year, he obviously was doing the hard work, but I caddied for him to try and get him into the British Seniors Open. We're going to do that all again this year. We didn't quite make it last time. We missed out by a few shots in qualification, but hopefully second time lucky. Enough of the golf chat. This is a sales podcast, as we say. Yeah, lots going on, all good. Last month I was over in France, so I have a client over there in the SaaS world. I love going to France. I love the French, especially with what's going on in the world currently, where the French are just brilliant, aren't they, at just saying what they think, and they don't put up with any shit, do they? Let's be honest about it. If something's not going the way the French people want, then they get up and they protest about it. And I really like that. And there's a lot going on in the UK here at the moment that we should be protesting about. I'm loving the fact that the farmers are clogging up Whitehall. Anyway, look, I'm meandering. France, what a country. Beautiful architecture. And interesting food as well, because my client took me out for dinner one night to a typical French restaurant. And listen, if I have a persuasion when it comes to food, it's more vegetarian. I mean, I do eat meat, but I've cut that right back over the last couple of years. But I will certainly enjoy a wonderful steak. But I wasn't quite ready for what was going to be presented to me in this beautiful, typical French restaurant in the center of Paris. I've never had marrowbone before, and will never again, because that's an acquired taste that I can certainly live without. I had snails as well, which was interesting, but just wonderful. And the culture in France, just wonderful people. But look, I was over there training them, and typically I think we've worked together for almost 3 years now. And the last time we did the training was a couple of years back, and it was leading into a trade show. And the outcome of the training that we were working on together was to create a compelling pitch to use on stand. They were exhibiting at an event, and they wanted to create a very compelling and engaging pitch for those people that attended the show and visited them on stand. And I remember my client sending me a cutting from a trade press magazine. Some journalist was reporting on that event, and they actually made a point of talking about my client and the fact that their pitch, the pitch they received on stand, was totally different to any other pitch that they'd received from other vendors at the show. So that was a huge tick in the box. So as a consequence of that, we went back again last month, because they're off to a big trade show in April. And really what today's session is about how we navigate ourselves in that world of events, because it is event season, it's silly season, already seeing loads of people in my LinkedIn feed promoting the fact that they're attending events, which is great. Myself, I guess I was just counting this up the other day, actually, over the last 25 years of being in this sort of the sales world, I've probably only attended about 50 events as an exhibitor. But the majority of those events, I have to say with regret, I attended those without any form of plan whatsoever. So you just literally rock up, stand on the stand, and then away you go. And I appreciate that many organizations will have a far more coherent and robust approach to exhibiting, don't get me wrong, but I'm almost certain, having spoken to a number of people in the sales industry over the last few weeks, that most organizations actually don't have that plan. So really today's podcast is all about sharing some kind of some understanding and awareness around how you can get the most out of exhibiting at events. And also what I'd quite like to do is share with you a framework that I shared with my client in Paris around how you can create that compelling pitch. And another reason why I wanted to do that is because I have another client here in the UK who is just attending an event, taking the sales team just to effectively walk around. So they're not paying to exhibit. They're just going to go and attend for the day at this trade show. And again, when I asked the head of sales, what's the plan? What's the outcome you're looking to achieve? He said, well, we're just going to go there and obviously see what's what. And I thought to myself, wow, that's great. But there's a huge amount of expense that goes into just literally taking a sales team to an event. Let's say, I think he's got 5 in his team. So you're taking 5 plus him, 6 people out of the field for a day. You're probably going to put them up in a hotel. There's going to be food and drink, maybe some networking drinks in the evening as well. And so if you pull all that lot together with salaries, then there's a significant investment just to literally turn up to a trade show and walk around the place. So you kind of want to make sure you get your money back, right? It is quite interesting that so many people will go to a trade show and not really have a plan. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you need to have one, but I'm here to say to anybody that hasn't got one that wants one, well, let's go and find one. And let's go and create that on this episode. So that's what this episode is all about. How can we create some kind of on-stand, maybe pre-show, maybe at show, maybe post-show strategy, which just allows us to get a little bit more out of the resource that we invest into attending or visiting trade shows. Now, before I sort of share that pitch framework, I'm just going to go through, I wrote down a handful of things that I think would just be common sense, but these are a bunch of tips, I would say, that would help you just get a little bit more clarity around how you can leverage your time, whether you're exhibiting or visiting an event. I guess the first thing that came to mind was leaning into sort of 7 Habits, Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind, right? Let's go right from the beginning. Let's really understand and calculate a couple of things. Number one, let's decide why we're going. What's our end game? What are we trying to achieve as a consequence of either visiting or exhibiting? And almost decide, okay, that's our objective, and therefore we can create a strategy based on achieving that, or that's definitely our intention to achieve that anyway. So first thing I would always say is decide what your why is for going, and then create a plan to do whatever you can to try and achieve that. So if you think about my client here in the UK who's just going to take the sales team and have a walk around, well, decide for yourself, well, who are we going to go and visit? We can get that list of exhibitors well in advance. It's on the website. Decide which of those, 5, 6 that you definitely want to go and visit, and the reason why you would want to go and visit them. And then make sure you go and visit them. You might reach out in advance and try and book some time on their stand, or just do it informally and casually turn up. You might decide that there is some key market intelligence that you're trying to establish. So if you think about the world of AI and how much that is now consuming effectively our day-to-day life, certainly in the business world, well, maybe you're an organization that's just looking at AI from a distance, not really understanding the implications of what it might mean to you as a business moving forward. Well, there must be some organizations that might be slightly further down that journey with AI than you are, that they operate in the same industry as you, and therefore wouldn't it make sense to go and see what they're doing? Talk to them, ask them, how are you interacting with AI? How do you see it playing out over the next 12 months? What are the challenges you're facing? What are the advantages you're going to take from it? So it could well be as a sort of just as a visitor, you've got 2 or 3, maybe 4 things that you think that's what success looks like. I'll go and try and find out as much about that by visiting these people while I'm there. If you're exhibiting, then of course it's a slightly more finite calculation because there's a cost for the stand, there's a cost for attendance, and all those things we talked about with people being there and manning the stand and hotels and drinks and entertainment. And then there's all the merchandising stuff, the stress balls, the pens, the brochures, whatever it might be that you have on stand. There's a cost associated with all of that, and it's all finite. And so you can whack that into a spreadsheet and there's your number. And then as a consequence of that, you need to at least have that event wanting to wash its face. Analyzing how much the cost and then knowing, well, and therefore we need to return that in terms of a payback with sales. So what are you going to do to try and recover that cost? And so therefore it's going through a process of understanding, well, I need to get people onto my stand. Well, how many people do I need to get on my stand? What is that footfall number going to look like? How am I going to do that? Am I going to call people in advance, or am I going to have some kind of compelling pitch which drags them on? Drags, what an awful thing to say. Brings them with huge curiosity towards my stand. But irrespective of that, it's understanding what you've got to do as a consequence to be able to pay back that investment cost. So decide what your return on investment is and create a strategy in order to hit that. So number one, I think the first thing I would do is start with the end in mind, decide your why, and then build a plan to achieve it. The next thing that comes to mind, hand in hand with that first point, is you've got to let people know you're attending. If I think back to Alan, the guy who I was talking about, who's the golfer, I know with his sales team, they start booking appointments to meet clients on their stand as exhibitors, a good couple of months out. Obviously, they're going to know that their clients and their potential clients are going to be attending that trade show because that's where that industry goes to exhibit and see new innovation and all those great things. So they know that most of their clients are going to be attending. And so they can sort of reach out with confidence and certainty that they're probably going to get some positive responses to their requests to meet. So definitely let your clients know you're attending. Pick up the phone and call them and say, look, we're going to be exhibiting in a couple of months' time. Are you going? And if you are, should we book some time? Because I'd love to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. And so really make sure you fill your diary up on that stand, or at least allocate someone to be the person that's going to host those meetings, because obviously you're going to get some casual footfall, but book meetings on stand. To support that, then, the next thing I thought of was run some kind of campaign on socials and through LinkedIn DMs XD weeks in advance. So often, you must see this yourself in your LinkedIn feed, on the day before someone's exhibiting, you get the classic come and visit us on stand. If you're reaching out to someone on the day before, then obviously what you've probably not done is primed that opportunity a month before. And you could actually probably, I don't know, maybe capture someone's attention and get them to change their diary so that they do attend, because 4 weeks earlier they saw that post, or they received that direct message, or they received your outbound email. Difficult for them to do that if it's the day before and they hadn't planned to be there, but perhaps they would have done. So think about campaigns. I'm not a marketeer, but I know enough about outbound campaigns to know that you've got to have something compelling. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be helpful for the other person. It's got to create curiosity. It's got to provide them with a reason and a desire and a need to want to go and attend and visit you on your stand. So think about running some kind of campaign, maybe 6 weeks out, 4, 3, 2, 1, leading into the event itself. And then hand in hand with that point, the next point would be, can we try and think of a better way? I'm trying not to be negative about this point, but can we try and think of a different way to do the come visit me on stand X, please post that we always see on LinkedIn? Just be a bit more creative. I mean, definitely tell us which stand you're on, and it's lovely to see you on video and promoting your products and services, but it's all a little bit like samey, and the golden rule in life is if you look like everybody else, guess what, you're probably going to be treated like everybody else. So be different. Try and find a way of making that come visit us on stand X slightly more engaging. Just do it better. Lead with the client's problem, or put something in front of them that's just anything other than the standard spiel that you read, right? Lead with an opportunity, or we're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z because the market trend over the next 12 months suggests this, and we want to show people who come and visit us how we think we can help impact positively that trend. So come and see us and have a chat with us on stand XYZ. I'm sort of thinking out the top of my head here, but you get the idea. Just be a little bit more creative with the come visit us on stand X post, please. So the next point then really is around that engaging opening question. So I'm not talking about that pitch. We'll get onto that shortly, but I'm talking about someone's walking past. It's the classic drive-by shooting where you're trying to catch somebody's attention as they're walking down the aisle towards your exhibition. It's funny, isn't it? Some people go out of their way not to make eye contact with you because they know the minute they make eye contact with a salesperson, then that salesperson's going to latch onto them and thrust some kind of leaflet under their nose. And so just, if I could give any advice to anybody, it's just be normal and ask somebody a very normal, non-sales related question. People have got their guard up. You've got to find some way of reducing that guard. And, a basic opening question like, hi, how you doing? Just out of curiosity, give me a score out of 10 of how you're enjoying your day so far. You're probably going to get a number back, which then allows you to ask the next question. Why did you score at that then? And then before you know it, you're into a conversation. Now, not everyone's going to answer you. Some people will think you're a weirdo. But if you want to get people onto your stand, you've got to create a conversation. You've got to start a conversation. But I've found pretty much every single time when I've been on a stand and someone's walked past and I go, hey, how's your day going? And they look at you and sort of grunt. I go, give me a score out of 10. Go on, how's it going? And they suddenly realise that actually they're having a conversation with a normal human being rather than a salesperson. And they go, oh, it's about an 8. And I go, 8? As high as 8? Well, what have you been doing? Why did you score at an 8? And we bring a bit of humour in. And then they say, well, actually, I've just been over here with my head. And then I'm off. And I go, oh, right. So what did you come to look for today? And before you know it, they're moving towards you. And then we're into a conversation.
You're listening to the Sales Cadence podcast with Mike Skies.
Leading off that, of course, then is the key point of this podcast, which is do then have a well-rehearsed and engaging pitch. And here's the key thing, for them, not for you, for them. Because now that you've engaged with them and they're coming towards you and they're willing to have a conversation because they suddenly realize you're a human being, now's your time to effectively, I'm going to say this pitch. You're going to pitch them. Now, you're not going to sales pitch them because this is a trade show. No one's selling anything at a trade show. But what you are going to create for them is what we sometimes refer to as a social pitch. It's that 30-second opportunity that you've got to keep that human-to-human, very personal contact conversation going, but weave into that some of your business information. So again, next point really is make sure you've got that well-rehearsed, engaging pitch, and I'll come onto that framework shortly. Then I'm thinking to myself, okay, what else? What other advice would I give myself if I was exhibiting at a trade show? And again, this is strictly for people who are exhibiting, not visiting now. The next point would be absolutely ban phones and laptops from the stand. Now, I do appreciate that we live in a world where technology is kind of almost essential. I accept that point. But can there be anything more frustrating and annoying than seeing, in fact, it's not frustrating and annoying, it's kind of sad really, if you walk past a stand and you're seeing two people sat at a desk with their heads buried in their phone. If there was anything that was less inviting to go and have a conversation with that organisation, I think that's it. Or if someone's at a desk doing some laptop activity, by the way, what does laptop activity mean? They're smashing out emails, that kind of stuff. Right? So I'm not suggesting for a minute you shouldn't have that tech there. Of course you should. This is normal life. Things happen. The world doesn't stop spinning just because we're at a trade show. But you kind of hopefully accept my point that, if you're staring at your phone, then you're not staring at potential clients. And so, while we're at it, chairs. For me, chairs on a stand should only be there for the benefit of your guests. They're not really there for us to go and sit on. Again, I'm a realist. I know standing on your feet for 8 hours can take quite a lot out of you. But if you're sitting at a desk, and you're not engaging with people as they come past, where, let's be honest about it, the rules of engagement are quite straightforward. If you're attending an exhibition as a visitor, you're basically saying, come and get me. And so the name of the game really is to go and get them and have a conversation with them. You can't do that if you're sitting down at a desk, buried in your phone or buried in your laptop. The next piece of advice I would give myself is, even though I've paid a flipping fortune for that ridiculous app that allows you to zap people's QR code to capture their data, which is an exorbitant amount of money, by the way, Huge amount of money. Absolute robbers, you lot, who give those apps away. But I do accept that's a fundamental part these days of how trade shows make their cash. But my message to myself is don't zap everybody. There is this kind of tendency sometimes in that competitive spirit that we have on stand. How many people can you scan? And how many can you get on your list? But we both know, don't we? From those of us that are in a sales world that have regularly exhibited and then we know what's coming next. We're going to go back to our offices the following day and we're going to plow through this list, right? And absolutely you should, of course you, and I'll come on to that point in a second, but don't fall into the trap that I used to fall into many years ago, which is, can I scan as many people as possible? Because I would remind everybody who's listening to this, that world of trade shows is a really weird environment. Everybody's in a flipping great mood. Well, most of the people are anyway, especially if it's day one. Everybody's there because they want to be there. They're out of the office, so they're feeling free. They're probably representing their company, so they're feeling quite important. And they're willing to have engaging conversations with those people that really care. So, you've got this cocktail of almost the perfect storm of insanity, because that's not reality, is it? Reality is people are very selective with who they speak to. They've always got their guard up. And quite frankly, they don't want to waste their time with people that aren't a fit for them. And so just be mindful with who you scan. Be mindful of whose details you take, because you've ultimately got to do something with that after the show, which would normally mean you're going to put them into some kind of either personalized outreach or you're going to put them through some kind of sequenced outreach. But ultimately, you're going to start that process of spending money on trying to catch up with that person who initially said, yeah, of course you can scan me. Yeah, I'll be interested in a meeting. Yeah, send me an email. Most of that stuff that they're saying is not real. They're just moving their lips. Because when you do reach out to them afterwards, you'll find that most people don't reply. So just be mindful, lead with disqualification rather than qualification. And if you reach that point where you think it's worth taking somebody's details, be really, really sure that when you do, something's going to happen once you do send them the email or you follow up with the phone. Off that point, then, I would say if someone really is interested and you've had a compelling conversation and they're saying, yeah, absolutely do send me a follow-up, I'll go, well, look, rather than send you a follow-up, which will ultimately lead to booking a call, why don't you, if you get your phone out now, I'll get mine and let's book a diary call. I'll send you an invite on the spot now. That isn't some kind of sales manipulation. To me, that's common sense. If someone said to you, yeah, I'm really interested and I'd be open to receiving an email to try and set up a call, let's just short circuit that. Get your phone out, tell me what day next week works best for you, and I'll send you a Teams invite. Don't miss that opportunity if someone really is interested to not book the call. Book the call. And then finally, when you do end the show and you get back to your office, and then you've got that big task to follow up with those 25, 50, however many people that you did scan over those 2 or 3 days, obviously you've got to go and do that work because the goal is in the follow-up, right? Just be mindful that you are one of maybe 100 people that they may have visited, of which they may have shared their data with 25, 50 of those. So their inbox is about to get absolutely smashed with inbound emails asking them for a follow-up call. So whether you go early or you go late, just be mindful of the fact that you will be competing for their attention in their inbox. Personally, I think if you do it the same night, if you're willing to invest the time in that evening and lead with a great to meet you today, wanted to get to you as soon as possible. I know you're interested in talking more about X. Here's X. I think you just stand the chance if you go early to beat everybody else who's probably going to take a day, 2 or even 3 days. I do personally remember myself being on the receiving end of this a couple of years ago, and I remember looking at that email on the train home thinking, hey, well, that was quick. And so by very nature, because I looked at it and it created an emotional reaction to me, seems like the right thing to do is to go early rather than late. Just be mindful that you're going to be one of many. And so again, whatever message you go with, whatever valuable information you share, don't forget you're competing with everybody else. So make sure it's valuable. Okay, let's get into that pitch framework. And I think before we start, we should just do a bit of myth busting around the word pitch. I mean, I don't know if you've ever found yourself in a lift, ever talking to a stranger, starting a conversation around what it is that you sell with the sole aim of the other person getting so excited that they decide to buy from you. No, me neither. I don't know whether I've been in hundreds of elevators over the last 20 years. Yeah, not one opportunity has ever presented itself where the person in the lift with me says, so what do you do then? And it gives me the opportunity to sort of respond with that stereotypical, what is sometimes referred to as an elevator pitch. So I don't know, maybe I'm hanging around the wrong buildings. Or maybe the elevator pitch is in fact a work of fiction, some sort of magical idea created for the movies, I guess, to maintain that sort of stereotypical salesperson's thing. But yeah, so if we talk about myth busting, then clearly there is no such thing as an elevator pitch. But the pitch actually is a very important part, really, of the whole kind of lead generation prospecting strategy that I know that most of you who are in sales and you listen to this podcast will understand. And actually, when you think about it, a really well crafted, well rehearsed set of words that you can deliver on demand and do so without sounding scripted, or just allowing the words to flow naturally so that you engage the listener, so you can sort of tap into their curiosity. Then I think what you do is you do open up the opportunity for yourself to start a conversation. That's ultimately what that pitch is all about. So we're not trying to pitch somebody our products or services, because that's just insanity. What we are trying to do is pitch the opportunity for them to want to be able to speak or have a conversation with us. Now, look, despite my sort of earlier sarcasm there about the elevator pitch, actually that did happen. And actually it dates right back to the 19th century, believe it or not. There's a guy called Elijah Otis, who was the founder of the Otis Elevator Company. And I think if you're thinking to yourself, Otis, that sounds familiar. Next time you stand in a lift, there's a little plate, a stainless steel plate where the buttons are. Either above it or below it, you'll find a bunch of words, and probably, because it's the most successful brand of lifts there are, or elevators there are, you'll find the word Otis there. Well, that dates back to the 19th century and the founder, Elijah Otis. And the whole premise really of the elevator pitch comes back to the problem that he solved, because back in the 19th century, he invented a safety system that would stop elevators from free falling. And what he did was he put that on public demonstration in New York. Because if you think about that, if you go back those few hundred years, the world was trying to find more real estate. And in those days, no one had ever built upwards. And so this whole idea of building upwards started to happen. And, once you got past the second or third floor or second or third story, then people go, well, I'm not willing to walk any further. And so when he invented the lift, people were scared of going in a box that would go up and then come down. They just didn't understand it. And so he had to produce this safety mechanism, this braking system, which is effectively what he demonstrates to the public. Hence the reason we've got this thing called the elevator pitch. And it's wonderful if you look back in history on that, and you think to yourself, wow, how amazing. But it really does essentially bring to life what the whole purpose of this kind of pitch is all about. It's about solving problems for people. And, not every pitch is going to be the same. There's probably 2 or 3 different types of pitches. Social pitch is the thing that you have with someone down a pub or at a trade show. When you zap their details and they accept your phone call or your email request for a meeting, when you jump on that call, you're then into what is sometimes referred to as a scheduled pitch, where you're meeting at a scheduled time to have a discussion. And then, therefore, after that, what you're leading into is a more formal sales conversation, which we can refer to as a sales pitch. So for the purpose of this podcast and this sort of framework, we're dealing with the first one, the social pitch, that first engaging 30 seconds of how you help somebody accept the fact that they either do need to speak to you or they don't. And so let's go through that framework. And like all good frameworks, there's got to be an acronym. And the acronym, I've tried to make this as easy as possible, folks, is PITCH, P-I-T-C-H. So the very first thing I would encourage you to do if you were going to adopt some kind of way of remembering, how to deliver this sort of social pitch using the acronym PITCH is the letter P, and the letter P stands for profile. There are some people we're meant to serve and others not so much. And the whole point of being at a trade show, exhibiting on stand when a complete stranger comes up to you, you have got no idea whether or not they're relevant to you or you're relevant to them. And so the simplest thing that you can do at the start of this engaging conversation is to sort of share with them the people that you serve, the people that you do your best work with. And so P stands for profile. you're trying to share in the opening sentence some indication that allows the person that's listening to you to decide for themselves, is he talking about me? Okay, so the first thing you've got to do in that opening few seconds is almost say, look, we tend to do our best work with this type of person. If you think about me and my role, so I'm pretty explicit with who I work with. Most of my clients tend to be selling a service rather than a product, but they're B2B. They're turning over greater than 5 million annual recurring revenue, and they have a sales team of greater than 5, but probably less than 50. And they're based anywhere in the UK and Western Europe. Now, I'm never going to be able to get all of that out in one go, because then I've just killed 30 seconds. But what you do is you select the relevant pieces and you use those in sort of step 1 of this pitch acronym, where you share with them the profile. And you pretty much say something along the lines of, look, can I just give you a little bit of an insight on who we work with? We tend to work with organizations in the B2B space, typically trading more than 5 million annual recurring revenue, and with a sales team between 5 and 50. Now, whatever your profile of ideal client is, you're going to extract some information and you're going to share that. And immediately the person on the receiving end is saying to themselves, is that me? And now, it might not need to be them, and it might not be them. But the other option you now have later on with the conversation is they might know someone like that. So the first part of that framework really is P for profile. The I in pitch stands for issue. And so we do know that people buy emotionally and they justify intellectually, or as it was once taught to me by the brilliant Nick Rickson, people buy in feeling and they justify in thinking to reach knowing, and knowing is the certainty. And so the I, which relates to issue, is we've got to now describe, the issue that those people that you described in profile have, the reason why that they would want to ever spend time or work with you. Whether you decide to talk about problems or challenges, or whether you decide to talk about opportunities and outcomes, it doesn't really matter. But what you do need to do is trigger that emotion part of their brain, which gets them curious or gets them engaged. And so if I go back to my world, some of the issues and challenges that organizations that I work with, they let's use the exact example of where we are right now. We just come to the end of Q1. They get to the end of the first quarter and they sort of realize that they're trending in the wrong direction. They're not going to hit their target over the next 3 to 6 months. Ultimately, the issue they face is they're not hitting target on a regular and consistent basis. Now, you'll have your own problems or challenges that you fix, or improvements or solutions or outcomes that you create for your clients. But if you explain to people what the issue is that the people that you work with have, again, you're asking that person who's listening that key question, which is, do I have those problems? Do I want those outcomes? And so the I in pitch is describe the issue. The T in pitch is treatment. Despite what Simon Sinek said, when it comes to sales, people don't buy your why. What they buy is the what you do. No one really is going to walk up to you on a trade show stand and say, tell me about your why. That's probably unrealistic. Now, the why is going to come in surely later on when they decide whether they do want to work with you and understand all those wonderful funky things that Sinek goes on about, culture and leadership and all that jazz. But nobody in their right mind is going to want to explore those things with you at the moment. What they're interested in is the what you do and what it does for them. And so the T in pitch is treatment. And this is where you describe how you solve the issue that you just shared. And whether it's, in my case, it's with sales training and coaching, or to be more explicit, if an organization, a number of conversations with clients at the moment who've got a lack of clarity about what to do moving forward with their sales strategy, well, the treatment I provide is an audit process. So we'll come into your organization, we'll spend no more than 2.5 hours, whether we do it online or we do it face-to-face, but we'll basically walk you through a sales strategy audit. And at the end of that, we'll then send you a 3-page document, which will give you a RAG-rated indication on where your challenges are and give you an indication on what you can do to fix it. So whatever you do, however you fix someone's problem, the T in pitch is how you treat it. The C in pitch is credibility. Because one of the things that every buyer will have, and it's a big risk for you as an organization if you're trying to help people buy what you sell, that every buyer will always have a fear of making a mistake. And so what you've got to try and create in that short period of time that you've got is a way of at least approaching the subject of the risk that they may have. And one of the easiest ways that you can do that is through credibility. And there's a number of ways in which you can reduce buyer risk, but whichever way you do it, it's entirely up to you. But you want to at least be able to show somebody that you're credible. Whether that's giving an example of a client that you've helped and the outcome that you've achieved for them. Buyer risk tends to reduce if they can see that other people have walked in their shoes before them and had great results. So just demonstrate to them how you've done that for somebody else in the past. And then finally, the H in pitch is hustle. Hustle is such an interesting one because quite often, especially if any of you have ever been in the past to networking events, and someone says to you, so what do you do? And you kind of tell them what you do. And what tends to always be missed at the end is a next step or a call to action. And so H in pitch is hustle. There needs to be a call to action, because without a call to action, it's just a conversation. And really, at the end of the day, we're paid to try and make conversations progress and advance and move forward, at least the ones that are relevant. You've got to have some kind of closing hustle. The obvious thing I can say to you is you need some kind of compelling conversation starter, which leads on. And I'll call that conversation starter a question. You need to just ask someone a question. Based on what I've just said, does any of that resonate with you? And if so, which? Or, if you think about the world that I operate in, where in most cases, if you think back to the issue, quite a lot of salespeople are doing all the right things, but they're not getting the results they want. And some of the reason is they lose control of the conversation. And sometimes that's because they're in front of difficult buyers. Some buyers are heavily trained to slow the deal down to try and gain advantage. And so if you think about hustle, the question you might ask at the end is something along the lines. So if you think about difficult buyers and the challenge that comes with sort of waiting continuously and not getting a response to follow-up, does either difficult buyers or sort of wasting time on follow-up ever show up in your business? And so when you sort of pull it all together, where you've got the P for profile, the I for issue, the T for treatment, the C for credibility, and the H for hustle, you sort of bring it into my world. So typically I work with B2B organizations. They're normally trading greater than 5 million annual recurring revenue. And they'll have a sales team somewhere between 5 and 50. And it's either a product or it's a service sale. And what tends to happen is, the salespeople are busy, but buyers do tend to have more control of the conversation in the deals that they're involved with. And as a consequence of that, sort of salespeople are always waiting for the next step to happen. And sometimes as a result of that, deals can slow down, they'll stall. On occasions, they just sort of stop with no real justification or reason. And when opportunities do progress, because the buyer tends to have the advantage, then price becomes the sort of primary conversation reason. It's the primary discussion point. And so, competing on price is really difficult. And if you do win business there, then typically what you're resulting there is paper-thin margins. And so the way that we solve that is through bespoke training and coaching, which happens after we've taken our clients through a very robust audit. That audit creates that visual representation of where the hotspots are, provides you with real quality advice on what to do about it, and creates that accountability where we'll come in 3 months later and find out how you've got on. And it works with our clients. We've trained hundreds of salespeople. In fact, some of the sort of results that we've had in the past with organizations is we once helped an organization increase their sales by 350% in 2 years. Now, I can't guarantee that kind of growth for everybody, but if you halved it, and halved it again, I think most organizations would be interested in having conversations around about a 40% growth in sales revenue. So look, just thinking about that, you ever see difficult buyers, or do you find that discounting prices to win businesses, do either of those two things ever show up in your business? Now, I appreciate when you listen to that took quite some time. I agree. And it would probably be unrealistic to want to talk all the way through that. But what you have got there is the ability to create a framework, a narrative, whereby you can have a conversation within that conversation. So there's no reason at all when you've gone through profile and you've explained who you worked with and you talked about the issue that you have, there's no reason why at that point you can't pause and reach out and ask them a question about it. Because what naturally will happen is, if they do have the issues you described, the next thing they're going to want to know is, well, how do you solve it? And so you say, well, look, now that you mentioned that you've got one of those, let me help you understand how we fix that for our clients. And then you're into the T. And you might be able to, at that point afterwards, say, does that sound like the sort of thing that might be of interest to you? And they go, well, yeah, that's good. Well, I'll tell you what I can do if you want me to. I can certainly send you some information around that audit process. Written a couple of books, can send you some through the post as well if you'd like, just to take some time to read, or let me know someone in your business you think might benefit from some books. I'll even sign them for you and put some kind of quirky message in the front if you like. And then at that point, of course, they might either say, well, that's really interesting. Who have you worked with? And then you're into further credibility statements where you go, well, typically in your sector, which sector you're in? You're in SaaS. So typically in the SaaS sector, we work with X, Y, and Z. And so, you don't have to deliver each of those 5 steps in pitch directly in one go. You can turn that into a conversation. But the point is you have a framework there that you can lean on and dip into and dip out of. Yeah, so pitch. Have a think about it. P for profile, describe who you work with. I for issue. What is the challenge that they face, these people that you work with, or what is the outcomes or opportunities that they're looking to try and get with your help? The T is treatment. How do you solve those problems for you? Or how do you help those people achieve those things? C is credibility. People want to work with people that they have confidence in. And the way that you create confidence is you explain to people, share with people what your credibility is that allows you to be the expert in that marketplace. And finally, the H is hustle, where there needs to be a call to action, because otherwise it's just a conversation. And really, we are employed to advance conversations. So put an H behind it, put hustle into it at the end, and ask them a simple question. And it could well be they say, no, none of that stuff exists, or none of that was relevant to us. And that's fine. In fact, the likelihood is that's probably going to happen, because you're at a trade show and you've got no idea who just walked up to your stand. But if they've walked up to your stand, my guess is they probably do have some relevance, which is why they did. Yeah, and hopefully some of those tips we talked about earlier on the podcast as well can be of use and relevance to you in terms of how to almost set yourself up for success, whether you're just simply visiting as a sales team or as an individual, or whether you've got a bit more skin in the game where you've actually invested some money and you are there on a stand and you're doing whatever you can to create the opportunity for that investment to pay back. And so hopefully some of those things that we talked about and those tips and those pieces of advice, certainly over the 50 or so events I've attended myself as an exhibitor, hopefully some of those will be of use to you and want to help you on your own strategy and your own journey. And so finally, look, before we shut this thing down, that audit I spoke about there in the pitch framework, it's you'll find that on the website. So if anybody, at the end of Q1, if you're not where you want to be and you're struggling to see what you should be doing next, then my advice really is to go and get yourself an audit done. If you want to go and take a look at mine's called Calibrate. You'll find it on the website. So go to salescadence.co.uk, go to the training page, and then just down the training page there, you'll see a little green button next to the word Calibrate Audit. If you click through that, it's a one-page PDF. It'll give you all the information that you need, and if you find at the end of getting through that you'd like to get in contact, well, the contact details are there too. Good, that's enough. If you're attending or you're exhibiting at events over the next 2 or 3 months, I wish you all the success in the world. And for you, the podcast listener, thanks very much for tuning in, and I look forward to speaking to you again on the next episode of the Sales Cadence Podcast.